The day my father died, my siblings thought they had already won. They took the $6 million estate, the New York apartment, the family business, and every dollar he owned. And me? My father left me only one thing: a rusty old locked safe sitting in the corner of the garage. My brother laughed when he saw it. "Looks like Dad left you the trash," he said. But there was also a small note taped to the safe, just 5 words: "Open this when you're alone." I never got the chance, because the very next day, my siblings smashed the safe open in front of everyone. They thought it was filled with cash, but what they found inside was the evidence that would destroy their lives forever. And by the time the police finished watching what was inside that safe, my brother and sister were being led away in handcuffs. Before I tell you exactly what happened, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable real-life stories like this. And I want to ask you something. If your own family betrayed you for money, would you expose them or walk away? Now, let me tell you what really happened. My father, Daniel Carter, was the kind of man people respected the moment he walked into a room. He wasn't flashy. He didn't drive exotic cars or show off his wealth, but everyone in New York's construction industry knew his name. 40 years earlier, he started with nothing but a pickup truck and a small toolbox. By the time he was 68, he owned Carter Development Group, a company that had built luxury apartment buildings all across New York and New Jersey. His net worth was estimated at around $6 million. But what mattered to him wasn't the money, it was the legacy. And he always told us the same thing growing up. Money can build houses, he would say, but character builds families. I wish my siblings had listened, because the moment money became involved, our family stopped being a family. There were 3 of us: my older brother Ethan, my older sister Rebecca, and me, the youngest, Emily. Ethan had always been the golden child, confident, charismatic, loud. He worked in my father's company as a financial manager, handling the books and vendor contracts. Rebecca was different. She had studied law and worked at a private firm in Manhattan. She was sharp, calculated, and extremely persuasive. Together, they were unstoppable. Growing up, they always acted like they were partners in everything, and I always felt like the outsider. Not because my father loved me less, but because I chose a different path. I became a social worker, helping elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. Ironically, that choice would end up saving my father's legacy. 2 years before my father died, he called me late one evening. It was strange. He almost never called that late. "Emily," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something." His voice sounded tired, more tired than I had ever heard it before. "Have you ever noticed anything strange about Ethan or Rebecca?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause on the phone. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "I think someone is stealing from the company." At first, I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. Over the previous year, my father had noticed small financial inconsistencies, payments that didn't match invoices, vendor contracts that didn't exist, money slowly disappearing. At first, it was only a few $1,000s, but eventually, it added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the only 2 people who had full access to the financial system were Ethan and Rebecca. A few months after that phone call, my father started acting differently. At first, it was small things. He would forget the names of vendors he had worked with for 20 years. He repeated the same questions at dinner. Once, he even asked Rebecca what year it was. Rebecca looked at Ethan with a worried expression. "Dad, are you feeling okay?" My father rubbed his forehead. "Just tired." But the mistakes kept happening. Soon, Ethan began telling everyone the same thing. Dad's memory isn't what it used to be. Rebecca agreed. He might be developing early dementia. Hearing that word terrified me. Dementia. I had seen what it did to people during my work as a social worker, but something about the situation felt strange. My father had always been incredibly sharp. Even at 68, he could remember construction budgets down to the last dollar. Yet suddenly, he was forgetting everything. Or at least that's what everyone believed. One afternoon, Rebecca called me. Her tone sounded overly sympathetic. "Emily, we need to talk about Dad." I drove to my father's house in Westchester that evening. Ethan and Rebecca were already sitting at the dining table. Documents were spread everywhere. Rebecca folded her hands. "Dad's doctor thinks we should prepare for the future." "What future?" I asked. "In case his memory gets worse," Ethan said. Then Rebecca slid a stack of papers toward me. "A new will." My stomach tightened. "What happened to the old one?" Rebecca sighed dramatically. "It's outdated." According to the new document, my father had already signed everything over. Ethan would receive the construction company, Rebecca would inherit the New York apartment, and together they would control the remaining estate, all $6 million. "And me?" I asked quietly. Ethan shrugged. "You'll get something later." Rebecca added quickly, "Dad wanted to make sure the business stays in the family." I stared at the signature on the will. It looked like my father's handwriting, but something about it felt wrong, shaky, forced. I looked up. Did Dad sign this in front of a lawyer? Rebecca's smile stiffened. Of course, but she didn't give a name. 3 months later, my father died suddenly. The official cause was a heart attack. The funeral was held in a small church outside New York City. Hundreds of people came. Contractors, employees, old friends, people whose lives my father had helped build. But the moment the service ended, everything changed. Ethan and Rebecca wasted no time announcing the will. Rebecca stood in the living room holding the document like a trophy. "As Dad wished," she said, "the estate will now be transferred." No one questioned it. Everyone assumed it was legitimate, except me. I stayed quiet until Ethan walked into the garage later that afternoon. "Hey, Emily," he called. "You should come see this." I stepped inside. The garage smelled like dust and motor oil. In the corner, behind some old tools, sat a small, rusty metal safe. It looked ancient. Scratches covered the surface. The lock was heavy steel. On top of the safe, someone had taped a folded piece of paper. My name was written across the front. Emily. My heart started beating faster. I opened the note. It was written in my father's handwriting. Just 5 words. "Open this when you're alone." I looked up. Ethan was staring at the safe. "So this is what Dad left you?" he said with a laugh. Rebecca walked over and crossed her arms. "Well, looks like Emily gets the junk." Ethan kicked the side of the safe with his shoe. "Probably full of old papers." Then he grinned. "Unless Dad hid some cash in there." Rebecca's eyes lit up immediately. And in that moment, I realized something. They weren't curious. They were greedy. The note was still in my hand. "Open this when you're alone." Dad had been very specific, but Ethan didn't care. He grabbed the safe and dragged it to the center of the garage floor. The metal scraped loudly against the concrete. "What are you doing?" I asked. Ethan shrugged. "Seeing what Dad hid from us." Rebecca stepped closer. "Emily, relax. If there's something important in there, we'll divide it." I shook my head. "Dad told me to open it alone." Ethan smirked. "Dad also thought it was 1998 last week." The comment made Rebecca laugh. "Exactly," she said. "You really think he knew what he was doing?" My stomach tightened. Something about this felt wrong. Very wrong. But before I could stop them, Ethan walked over to the workbench. He grabbed a heavy steel hammer. Then he turned back towards the safe. "You might want to step back," he said, and before anyone could say another word, the hammer slammed against the lock. The sound echoed through the garage. Rebecca watched with excitement. Ethan swung again. The lock started to bend. One more swing. The metal snapped open. The safe door slowly creaked outward, and everyone leaned forward to see what was inside. Ethan's smile faded almost instantly, because the safe was not full of money. Inside were only a few simple items: a sealed envelope, a small black flash drive, and a thin stack of documents. "That's it?" Ethan muttered. Rebecca grabbed the envelope. On the front were 5 handwritten words: "Read this before anything else." Rebecca opened the envelope. She began reading the letter out loud. Her confident voice slowly started to change. "Ethan, Rebecca." She paused. Her eyes moved across the page. Then she continued reading. "If you are reading this letter together, it means you ignored my instructions." The room went silent. Rebecca swallowed. My father's words continued. "And if you opened this safe before Emily did, then everything I suspected about you is true." Ethan scoffed. "This is ridiculous." But Rebecca kept reading. "For the past 3 years, I have had strong reasons to believe that money has been disappearing from Carter Development Group." Ethan crossed his arms. Dad was paranoid, but the letter wasn't finished. "So I made a decision. I decided to pretend something was wrong with my memory." My heart skipped a beat. Rebecca's voice shook slightly as she read the next line. "Yes, Ethan, Rebecca, I faked the dementia." The words hit the room like a bomb. Ethan's expression froze almost instantly. Rebecca stared at the page like she couldn't believe what she was reading. My father's letter continued. "I wanted to see how far you would go if you believed I was weak. And unfortunately, you did exactly what I feared." Rebecca slowly lowered the letter. "No, this can't be real." But the safe still wasn't empty, and the next item inside was about to make things far worse. Ethan picked up the black flash drive. "What is this supposed to be?" he muttered. Rebecca grabbed a laptop from the kitchen table nearby. Within seconds, the video file appeared on the screen. The file name was simple: Final Recording. Rebecca clicked play. The screen flickered. Then my father appeared. He was sitting in his office chair, calm, serious, looking directly at the camera. "If you're watching this," he said slowly, "then my suspicions were correct." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. My father continued speaking. "For 3 years, I have quietly documented financial discrepancies in my company." He held up a thick binder. "And every piece of evidence leads back to the same 2 people." He paused, then said their names: Ethan Carter, Rebecca Carter. The room felt suddenly colder. My father opened the binder. Bank transfers, fake vendor contracts, shell companies. He flipped through the pages. Over time, the total amount stolen from the company reached $2.7 million. Rebecca slammed the laptop shut. "That's not proof," she snapped. But Ethan looked nervous now, very nervous, because the video wasn't the only evidence in that safe. I picked up the stack of documents inside the safe. At first glance, they looked like regular financial records, but when I lifted them, I noticed something strange. The bottom of the safe felt thicker than it should. I tapped the metal. Clink. Hollow. My father had built a hidden compartment into the safe. I slid my fingers under the edge and pulled. a thin metal panel popped open. Inside were several more items: a sealed legal document, a small external hard drive, and another envelope. Rebecca's face went pale. "What is that?" I opened the legal document. My hands started shaking because the title at the top read, "Last Will and Testament, Daniel Carter." But this wasn't the will Rebecca showed at the funeral. This one was different, completely different. It was signed, stamped, and notarized by a Manhattan attorney. And according to this document, the entire estate, the company, the apartment, every dollar was left to one person: me. The envelope was trembling in my hands. Inside were forged life insurance documents. They named Ethan and Rebecca as beneficiaries, illegally. Dad had left them thinking the payout was real, but these documents were completely fake, a trap to catch them. Then I noticed something else, a folder labeled GPS tracker data. Inside were maps and timestamps showing Ethan and Rebecca sneaking into the house while Dad was alive, planting fake evidence, forging documents. I felt my stomach twist. My siblings had been planning this for years, and my father, he knew everything. He had caught them on camera, tracked them with GTS, and secretly documented their every move. It was meticulous, perfect, and it was damning. I called the police immediately. The detectives came the same day. They reviewed the documents, the video, the financial records, and the GPS logs. They asked me to explain everything calmly. Ethan and Rebecca had no idea what was coming. When the investigators played the video confession, their faces turned pale. They argued, denied, screamed, but every claim was crushed by evidence from the safe. The GPS data showed them entering the house multiple times at odd hours, planting falsified invoices and fake checks. The forged life insurance documents were time-stamped to appear legitimate. The embezzlement numbers matched exactly what Dad had recorded secretly. The police shook their heads. "This is enough for criminal charges," one of them said quietly. 2 weeks later, Ethan and Rebecca were arrested. The headlines were brutal. Carter siblings charged with embezzlement and insurance fraud. Inside the family betrayal that shocked NYC. I watched from the back of the courtroom as they were led away in handcuffs. Their faces were full of disbelief. "Emily, how could you do this?" Ethan shouted from behind the bars. I smiled faintly. Good riddance. For the first time in years, I felt free. The company was mine, the apartment, mine. But even more importantly, I had justice for my father. With the recovered funds, I made a decision. I could have lived a quiet life, keeping everything for myself, but my work as a social worker had taught me the pain of financial abuse. So I started a nonprofit, Elder Financial Protection NYC. We help families protect their elderly members from scams, theft, and fraudulent wills. Every day I see stories similar to mine, and every day I make sure other families don't go through what Dad and I experienced. There was one last item in the safe, a small sealed envelope with my name. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter from my father. "Emily, if you are reading this, it means you were strong enough to fight for the truth. I knew you would. I'm proud of you. Love, Dad." I sat in the garage holding that letter. Tears rolled down my face. Even though he was gone, I felt him there, protecting me, guiding me, and showing me what true strength and justice look like. So that's the story of how my father's junk safe became the key to exposing my siblings' betrayal, and how justice was finally served. And now I want to ask you, if your own family betrayed you for money, would you fight back or walk away? Tell me in the comments. I want to know your thoughts. And if you love real-life emotional revenge stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next unbelievable story.